everyone, Shintai here, and I am joined by a very special guest. I have here with me Kayin. How you doing, man?
Hey, doing real well.
For everyone that's watching who don't really know who you are, do you mind giving a bit of an introduction?
I'm Micheal Kayin O'Reilly. I am the creator of I Want to Be the Guy, primarily. It's basically all I'm known for.
Well, hopefully that will change with your newest release.
Hopefully. Also known for I Want to Be the Guy Gaiden, but I think that's more known for the Evo playthrough thing with Floe. That moment is more noteworthy than the game itself, really. So, yeah, I'm an independent game developer. That's basically, at least for right now, that's all I'm doing right now. Getting close to releasing my next game, Earth Prologue. This is something I've been trying to do for years and years and years since I was a kid.
Since you are mostly known for I Want to Be the Guy, and that's how I found out about you. I did want to talk about it first, and then we could talk about your new game, which also looks awesome, and I'm very much looking forward to it. I remember you were telling the story, the impetus for I Want to Be the Guy. I think it was a drunk conversation between you and a friend.
Oh, that just came from naming the game, because everyone thinks it was like a Homestar Runner reference or something like that. I forget how the conversation even went, because now it's like 8, 9, like however long ago that came out. But yeah, we were just like riffing back and forth, and that name came out, and I'm like, hey, that sounds cute. And while we were doing this, I was also teaching him how to do pixel art. I did stuff with Megazooks and stuff like that, like simple ASCII stuff, so I knew how to make a very simple character, at least really easily. I'm like, hey, let me just make you a little guy with like a 5-frame walk cycle. And I show him this character, and we're joking about the name. I'm like, hey, I should try and make something like this, because he just showed me a tool called Multimedia Fusion 2. From there, I'm like, what should I do with this? Like, did a few things trying to make something that looked super fancy with big graphics and stuff like that. And I'm like, I can't make this stuff. Like, all this stuff is too intensive. Like, trying to make, like, really nice, like, Symphony of the Night style backgrounds and stuff. It's just like, this is impossible for me. So, I recently played a game, well, not recent, back then, called Awada, The Life-Ending Journey, which was this ASCII graphics, 2chan, sorta, I Want to Be the Guy-like game, filled with, like, traps and stuff like that. And Awada was not, like, if you play Awada now, it's a complete game. But back then, it was incomplete and kind of forgotten about by the developer. And I'm like, oh, this is such a cool idea, like, pulling these video game references in and kind of, like, doing these screw job tricks and stuff like that. I'm like, I should give this a shot. And I just started taking this character I just made and this new engine I was just shown and trying to make something. And I decided to make something that would function mostly to troll my friend Paul, who's also the voice of the kid. I was just making this game at first to just piss off a friend. And I was uploading online to piss off some other friends for fun. And it just kept ballooning, and then, like, very quickly, actually a little bit after my Kaisen, I'm thinking, like, there's something here, I need to keep going with this.
It first started off as like a drunk discussion between some friends, and you just wanted to troll some people, and eventually it turned into this project.
Yeah, I mean, it really was just like a practice project at first. Let me just make this to get used to the system, and while I do this, I'll have some fun pissing my friend off. And I just ended up pissing everybody off, and it was great.
It's pretty clear one of the strong inspirations for the game, as you already mentioned it, Castlevania Symphony of the Night, as well as Metroid. Are there any other inspirations to the game?
I mean, you look at the game, it's just absolutely filled with them. I mean, I can't say every game that's referenced is an inspiration. A lot of them is just the culture of games, right? There's a lot of that.
Yeah, like Ryu coming out of nowhere and spin kicking you to death.
Right. I love Street Fighter, but I don't think Street Fighter influenced the game design. Well, I guess it technically did, because crazy. Not in the same way of, like, Metroid or everything like that. But definitely Metroid. I've always loved, like, seemingly every indie designer, the idea of the Metroidvania. The idea of having a thing that isn't, like, discrete levels, but is a unified world. And it's funny, because now that you have all these I Want to Be the Guy fan games, one of the things I always see, one, I compare them to I Want to Be the Guy, and this isn't necessarily something that's important or makes the game better for most people or really anybody, but it's a very stylistic difference I notice. There's a lot more cohesion to the areas in I Want to Be the Guy. I seem to be even then having this thing of like, okay, so this part, like, you're going deep, so you're underground here, so there's going to be nothing outside, and like having some idea what the structure of the world is, and trying not to make the stage too abstract. Like, if you look at Boshi, some of the screens are like, what even is this?
That actually is interesting. I was going to ask you about your thoughts on some of the, I guess you could call them copycats of your game, and how you felt about them.
I think it's awesome. They're fan games, so it's funny because it's like, are they? At this point, they're so their own thing.
It's like its own subgenre.
That you have people making I Want to Be the Guy fan games who probably haven't actually played I Want to Be the Guy.
How would you even do that?
Among the I Want to Be the Guy community, my works are kind of, I don't know if they're divisive, like that might be too strong a word, but it's not uncommon to not be a big fan of I Want to Be the Guy. Like, oh yeah, I want to be the guy, that's kind of like boring. Like, I want to play like Camilla and Bashi and like whatever. There's certain people that's just like, oh yeah, no, I don't bother with that, because they're more about the hard challenge aspect of it. And the cute, funny, trolly things are kind of like the secondary aspect of it. While I want to be the guys on the more extreme end of the trolley spectrum. And actually, like, I look at a lot of the fan games and stuff, and again, this isn't a problem because this is a game they want to make, but like, you just see spikes, like everything's coated with spikes and everything like that, and it's like, I want to be the guy, there's like one room where that's the thing. No, wait, there's two rooms. And both of them are played for the gag of this is a room full of spikes, right?
I remember very distinctly in the game that you did use spikes often, but it wasn't just universally spikes. You did try to make an effort to change things up and to make all of the rooms feel different in a way, and they all had different hazards.
I think of I Want to Be the Guy compared to the fan games, I feel like there's a lot more game feel in the I Want to Be the Guy level design, while the fan game, and this isn't universal because the fan games come in many different varieties. Like even Bashi is less the extreme end than like Camilla or whatever those series are, which are all just a bunch of like really hard boss fights. Like there's I Want to Be the Guy fan games that are just like a song from Nico Nico Dojin plays for 20 minutes and you just have to survive a 20-minute long pattern.
Jesus Christ. That sounds nuts.
So, like, even Bashi has its own type of game. That's why, like, Bashi is really, like, the best of the knockoffs, because it has its own feel, at least. Feels more like a game than a lot of other fan games that feel kind of more like just challenges.
That kind of reminds me also, me personally being, I guess you could say, somewhat of a creative person, given that I make videos. Whenever I look back on my work, I always see what's wrong with them, and I have to wonder if it's the same for you. Have you looked back on I Want to Be the Guy? And I'm sure you're still very proud of it, but on a certain level, do you look back on it and be like, I wish I could have fixed that?
Oh yeah, I always talk about the Bowser boss, which is like the least fun boss in the game. And there's like some parts of it that are fun. Like the actual last phase with like Wily and jumping the ball and stuff, like that's fun, but like there's so much tediousness to the boss fight and stuff where if I went back I would just totally axe that. In terms of like the level design, I think it's mostly good. Like I wouldn't change anything really except for maybe like if I was going back and I was doing like a refresh, like I might tweak things a little bit, but I can't even think of what. It'd be things I would find like playtesting it. I mean, if I did things now, I would do certain things like completely differently, but that doesn't matter. In the context of what it was, most of the level design I felt was pretty good. And some of the boss design could be questionable at times. The things that disappointed me really disappointed me, like the Bowser boss, for sure. That just feels like, I just feel bad for anybody who has to go through that. And there's like little like, okay, so here's an example of like a little thing I wouldn't do now. So when you beat the Bowser boss, you have to go backtrack to save. When you enter the room, you fall down one tile. So a lot of people try and exit back to save and hit against the wall and not realize they have to jump and not save against a really tedious boss and immediately get killed. Me now, I would go through that extra level of just having a little thing that like, boosts you up that one extra tile, having a slope and not making that be an issue. That's not a troll. That's not like whatever. That's just me at the time not knowing what to do and being a little lazy about it and that having, negative consequences. Oh, another example. Birdo's eyes don't properly change back between phases. Too tedious to fix it because of the way the color replacement worked. Thinking about that now, it's like the things I've done for BEP for like minor improvements. It's like that's so minor that like, why didn't I do that? Like, it's weird to think back on.
On a certain level, that might give the player the wrong impression about the boss.
Yeah.
The eyes not reverting back, they may think that might mean something when it's not.
Yeah, and I think at the time too, where it's still like this game, where it's like such a it's a free Dojin indie game. At the time when that was just starting to become a thing, so there was sort of a thought. I can't sink that much time into it, but thinking about it now, it's like that was such an easy problem to fix. Like doing the color change was a weird thing in Multimedia Fusion 2, but it's like it wasn't that big a deal. I could have done it. Like it would have taken like 10 minutes, but. You can't over-polish I Want to Be the Guy because it's sort of unpolished nature is what makes it. But those two examples I came up with are things where it's like, yeah, I would change that. But, If you start making things a little too nice, then it's like you've just totally changed the game, and it's going to lose all its charm, and people are going to prefer the original version, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, you don't want to George Lucas it.
Exactly. Because I got a new version of Multimedia Fusion 2, so I've been thinking, like, maybe after BAP I'd go and I'd do sort of an updated version where I just fix some bugs.
I Want to Be the Remake?
Yeah, well, no, not remake, but just like I Want to Be the Guy Plus, right? Where I just fix some stuff up and then maybe add a little bit of new content. But I don't know if I'm going to do that. But yeah, that makes you think, like, what do I want to fix? Because I don't want to fix most of the bugs, for sure. Because most of the bugs are awesome and beneficial, and you can do stuff, but like certain things that ruin it for the player and stuff, I want to take care of.
Yeah, that all makes a lot of sense. Me personally, while sometimes I do reflect on certain videos and be like, oh, I should redo it. At the same time, there are people who liked it the way it was, and it's probably best to leave it alone.
As long as something exists like that, the easier it is to be like, yeah, that's how it should be. I shouldn't mess with this.
I also wanted to ask you about the popularity of the game. Do you know how it came to be like it became as popular as it was? And how do you feel about the way it blew up the way it did?
You know what? It blew up exactly how I thought it was going to blow up.
Really? That's cool.
And I knew at the time, it's like, okay, this is going to get popular on 4chan. Like, I already knew. And I knew it was going to be through 4chan. The part I didn't know that was also super important, and probably actually more important in the long run, it's like, so I knew it was going to blow up. My guess on what the mechanism for it to blow up was slightly wrong. I did not predict YouTube. Because this is just when LPs were starting to become a thing to the wider internet. Like, I've never been like a Something Awful guy, so I was never part of that. Seeing their LPs back in the day, their text LPs, the emerging video LPs. So that was just starting on YouTube when I Want to Be the Guy came out. And what a perfect game to do a Let's Play of.
That's actually how I found out about the game. I saw Ultra J-Man's a Let's Play of it, and I fell in love with the game. I was just like, this is amazing. This is so incredible.
There's certain guys like J-Man and Cloud where we kind of made each other in a weird way. J-Man got more popular because he was playing this crazy game, and my game got more popular because J-Man was playing it. And it worked out for everybody. And then I ruined LPs.
In a way, because then I think it gave rise to the angry LPer that just rants and raves and just gets angry at everything. It's just, it all kind of became the same.
I think that would have happened anyway, but, you know, it certainly sped it along. And I remember, like, the Retsu Praise guys giving me shit and stuff.
I do remember they made some Retsu Prey videos on you. They did one on your Super Metroid one because you had the cursor.
I 100% will admit I have cursor blindness, and it annoys my friends to no end. Like, that's something that's just always been true. Like, I'll be playing a game, I'll have, like, a cursor in the middle of the screen, and they'll be freaking out. Until you point it out, I don't notice it. And it makes sense, too, because your brain fills in most of the information that it sees. It's so easy to have a small cursor, and the brain will just, such a small detail, and it's static and unmoving.
It just kind of filters it out.
Yeah, so, like, if an enemy's moving in your brain, and it hits a cursor or something like that, your brain doesn't go, oh no, it hit the cursor. Well, for a lot of people, it fills in that detail. It's the same reason why you can have like a stuck pixel on a screen or like a really big blemish on some people's screens. And like a lot of times you won't even notice it until you notice it, and then you can't unsee it for like an hour. But then it goes away because your brain just fills that in. But yeah, they ragged on me pretty hard on that. And it was weird because I was doing this weird Super Metroid run where I was like just doing weird stuff.
I do remember that playthrough. I wasn't really all that bothered by the cursor.
That was my first time doing a video recording. It's incredible for me to think back then how hard it was to get a playable frame rate and record a game. And now video recording and streaming is almost free. It's like, what?
It's so different now.
Yeah.
You also did, the method used was interesting. You actually filmed your monitor to Let's Play I Want to Be the Guy.
Yes.
I recommend people watch that because it was kind of like a director's commentary of sorts.
I think I did as good as a cam job as you could do a cam job.
No, yeah, I didn't really mind it. You can still see what's going on. It's fine.
Yeah, that was annoying because I Want to Be the Guy was extra hard to run since it wasn't a DirectX game. So capping it was even more annoying. Like, you couldn't fraps it or anything. Back when fraps was the way to do things.
Oh man, that was back in the dark ages.
Like, I'm sure some people still use Fraps, but now it's like even when I'm just doing like local recordings, it's like I'm just gonna load up OBS, whatever.
We talked about this a little bit before about how the game is very much about trolling people. So how do you feel about some of the accusations of the game is just difficulty for the sake of it and there's no actual true game design to it?
I think over time, history has been very kind to me. I think most people now, when they talk about I want to be the guy, even if they don't like it, I think it becomes clear over time too when you see something, it's like, oh, this thing spawned imitators, and yet this thing still stands the test of time. It's like, okay, so there has to be something there even if you don't like it. And especially among like game designers. Like for a while I was very self-conscious where I wouldn't say what I did when I was talking among game designers. I would just rather pretend to be the guy who didn't do anything than to say I want to be the guy. Then nobody ever had a negative reaction to it. Yeah, most of the people who say that are just people who casually play games. They're not invested in game design. They just have their opinions. So, you know, it doesn't bother me that much. I think clearly a lot of effort goes into predicting the behavior of players. Even in AAA games, Naughty Dog talking about how do you guide a player to do what you want them to do. It's the same thing. It's exactly the same thing. The idea is just, only I'm going to do it and then I'm going to use that information to be a jerk. But it's the same type of eye for level design.
I was thinking about it, and playing the game, it really does feel like you were trying to anticipate what people were going to do, and you took advantage of that in order to mess with them. I think it just makes for a really fun experience in its own twisted sort of way.
I have a friend, he's a games researcher, so like he doesn't actually directly work on games, but he like studies how people play games and stuff like that, whatever, and he's very interested in like testing and stuff like that. And he always like, what do you do about people who don't record when they test BEP? Like, how do you know what they do? I know what they do. Like, I made the game.
On a certain level, you can ask yourself, what would you do?
Right. And generally then when they tell me they had issues, I can extrapolate. I'm usually pretty close. I can't 100% know, but I don't need that much footage for me to figure stuff out. Like, I watched a friend, like, early on. BEP had no air control at all. And I was just noticing that, like, a lot of people who weren't, like, serious platform players had issues jumping forward. Because people are so used to being able to jump and then hit forward, and not the Castlevania thing where you have to hold forward when you jump if you want to jump forward.
I guess since I grew up with a Super Nintendo, I never really had that problem.
Yeah, no, like for me, it's like one of those things where for me, it's like, oh, I would never even consider this as an issue. Like that's the type of stuff that I need to see, but I only need to watch like one or two people play of like various skill levels. Like, oh, okay, like I see, and then I can like go from there. Like I don't need to see how they can tackle obstacles. You know, I need to see it like once or twice to confirm that I was right, but generally what I need to see is what I can be told. Yo, this part was too hard. I died like a million times and got frustrated. But predicting player behavior and baiting them and stuff like that, it's like whatever. That's helping a friend play Rust, which is a game like I don't even play, but that's a game where you like make traps and stuff and your bases to lure people. And I was like just explaining to him all these like optical tricks you can do in a 3D game that like preys upon certain types of like player behaviors and stuff like that. Trick people into falling into holes and stuff like that.
That actually reminds me of this weird Atlas game called Trap Gunner. It was a cool little PS1 game. Whenever I played it with friends, it was cool because you had to figure out how your friend was thinking, and you would place traps around the arena in order to beat them up. You could also melee them, but the real meat of the game was figuring out your opponent and putting traps where you think they'd go. I'd like to see it get re-released.
Yeah, I was seeing like a Japanese video of this, not knowing what the game was called, and being like, what the heck are they playing?
Yeah, Trap Gunner. It's a cool little game. Back when Atlas used to make something other than Persona and Shin Megami Tensei.
That's like the same era, basically, of when Square started to be weird, too.
Yeah, they made a bunch of weird stuff.
Like, one of my favorite shmups is Ionhinder.
Yeah.
Yeah, Square made a shmup. Oh, yeah, Square made a beat-em-up. Like, what?
They made Bushido Blade.
Oh, Bushido Blades is awesome!
Yeah, man. Bushido Blade was so sick.
That's popular with my fighting game friends when everybody gets in the mood to play like something weird. Bushido Blades feels like it could have been like an indie game. Because it's also like really short and stuff.
In a way, it kind of also feels like... it sounds a bit demeaning to say it, but almost like a tech demo. But I don't mean that in a bad way.
No, the original one kind of was, though. The hints of an idea that weren't fully realized. The combat was, but, like, oh, you're running away from these people to, like, escape. You have to fight them and whatever. And in practice, either you sat there in the starting area and beat them all, or you just ran to the well. There's all this stuff here with like running around like the free world that like wasn't implemented well at all, but it was like really cool. That's a game I would love to see come back. And I would love to see it come back more in its original incarnation than Bushido Blades 2. Which was still a fun game, but I want a Bushido Blades 1 remake. There was something just so, like, sad and beautiful about the story was that you have to, like, kill your friends. This could have been something cool, but it was, like, just... It felt like they didn't have enough time.
I think that's the sad fact about most games, where something that seemed like it was going to go somewhere and didn't, probably because they didn't have enough time or money.
Yeah, the multiplayer was still super fun, but I feel like that single player had a chance to be something, like, really awesome. And I think it was also like a generation behind. Like if you did that on the PS2, I think that's when people would be more used to doing these kind of like open things.
I kind of see it like the PS1 tried to lay down a lot of foundations for 3D games, and then the PS2 was the era where they tried to like smooth things out.
Yeah, when you look at the best PlayStation 1 games, they're games that could have been Super Nintendo games. Metal Gear could have been a 2D game.
In a lot of ways, it kind of is.
Right. If you go back and you play Metal Gear 2, the actual MSX one, it's like, oh my god, this is Metal Gear Solid.
Yeah.
It's like, really is, like, it plays almost exactly the same. Just with a few mechanical differences that you would expect from a sequel. Like, you could just put neck breaking. You could have put anything in Metal Gear Solid in Metal Gear 2, and it would have worked. Any of the RPGs and stuff. Symphony of the Night.
I love Symphony of the Night.
Oh, what a good game. I love that game so much.
Although I do feel like Igarashi, I think he kind of improved the formula as he kept making more games like it. I think some of the DS ones are really great.
But I think this is the thing with polish, too. Because I think the thing that makes Symphony of the Night special is the fact that there's just so much raw creativity to the point where it's basically almost inefficient. You're just making things and putting it in with no rhyme or reason. And that's awesome. And you go to the DS ones, and they're sometimes so clear-cut and perfect about things that it kind of loses what makes Symphony of the Night really cool.
I can agree with that. I think Symphony of the Night has a certain level of grit to it and a certain roughness to it that's absent in the DS ones.
Yeah, I mean, when you get to the other ones where it's like the level of refinement is just obviously way better. I do really like the DS ones. And I guess a lot of them it's also running out of money. Like, you can play Order of Ecclesia and you can tell they ran out of money at some point. And they still did pretty good despite that.
I actually haven't finished that one yet. It's the only one I didn't beat.
There's parts in Ecclesia where they're reusing, like, big, obvious sections of map. There's, like, palette shifting it. It's like, I've been in this same hill with a cave under it, like, 3 times. They do okay because, at least for them, they have, like, filler in the middle content. So the end of the game's still really good. The end of the game is surprisingly more than I would have expected from the middle bit. So it's like when they went in and they have to fill in some details, they did some, like, I hate saying lazy because usually it's just time and money, but some stuff that people would call lazy.
What are some things that people say about game development that you feel is like some misconceptions about game design? Like when people say something, like you just said, you didn't want to say it was lazy, it was because it was probably something else. Are there any other things like that you want to talk about in terms of game development?
I think that is the biggest one. I think, again, like, everybody needs to realize nobody wants to release a bad game. But then there's also, didn't they realize as a thing? And, like, usually, yeah. And it's usually, like, too late. Or, you know, they're not, again, not the time or the money. Or, like, oh, they couldn't find these bugs. It's like, a lot of times they didn't. They just, like, it's not that important. The effort to fix this is way less than the damage it does. And I got other things to do. I think, actually, one of the big things in general is not realizing how involving certain things you want that seem really simple are. So my favorite, I mean, this is something you can work around. Nowadays, for like AAA games that have this, there's no excuse, but like, why can't I skip the cutscene for the boss fight? And this seems like an obvious thing, like, yeah, why can't you? And in a lot of games, like, I have this problem in BEP. My thing is actually, my compromise was, like, allowing things to be kind of fast-forwarded. A lot of times you'll have a cutscene, and the cutscene will establish, let's say, like, the stage and everything like that. Something will break down and everything like that, and the physics you have for things to break down lead to the end state that you want for the boss fight to happen. And I was like, why can't I skip it? It's like, well, all these things have to happen because this thing emerges. These situations that lead to the boss fight emerge because of all these other things that happened. And if there's enough elements that you have to make sure are in the right place, you have to manually do that to make the boss fight skippable. And like nowadays, like when you're making like a AAA game, there's so many things where you can just like storing states and stuff of objects where you can save it easily. You'll still see like indie games and stuff where you can't skip boss intros, and it's like, why not? It's like, because actually it's a lot of work.
That's interesting. I didn't realize there was a lot more to it than that. That certainly enlightens my perspective on it.
Yeah, like you can have a boss break down a wall, and the wall that breaks down kind of creates some boundary for the stage. When you skip the cutscene, you want to make sure all that stuff's in the exact same spot.
I want to transition into talking about your new game, but before that, is there anything else about I Want to Be the Guy that you want to say?
Before I started working on Brave Earth, I was like, oh, let me try and make an engine in this new thing called Construct. Construct Classic in this case, referring now. Nobody should ever use this program. It's terrible. It's terrible in the complete opposite way of Multimedia Fusion 2. Like, Multimedia Fusion 2 was missing features and was unstable garbage when you exported it. Construct is, at least when you export things, they're stable, which is nice. The IDE has lots of stuff in it, but the thing crashes all the time. It's non-supported. The developers gave up on it, even though they promised they wouldn't, whatever. It's just like a nightmare. There's no way to get any support for it now. It's just like terrible. And even they'll tell you not to use it anymore, even though they promised everybody for years and years that it was capable of making full-featured great games. Which technically it is, because BEP's going to come out, and there's another game, Iconoclasts, which are coming out that's also made in Construct. But I know both me and Konjak have both at times been like, why are we stuck in this shitty game engine? But yeah, okay, so I'm making an I Want to Be the Guy engine in it, and I realized that like there's a weird like memory leak thing where like the more things you add to the game, the less frame rate you get. There's a certain amount of overhead where if you have like a super huge game, in any engine you should expect that it's going to have impact, even in parts where it doesn't matter to some degree. In this, it was like an unreasonable amount of frame rate loss. So I'm like, yeah, forget it. I won't make an I Want to Be the Guy game. I'll make To Wait for Time Castlevania 1 game. Just flat out. Like a study, basically, right? Because I looked at Castlevania 1. Castlevania 1 had very few art assets. It had very simple bosses. I'm just going to go as simple as I can, make a game in a month, or maybe a few months, that won't hit into the limitations of this game maker. Because I never want to use Multimedia Fusion 2 again, and maybe by the time I'm done with this, Construct won't suck. Well, BEP just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. The developers, actually, the last thing they did of any worth was they patched that memory leak bug. So I realized, like, hey, actually, I have this I Want to Be the Guy engine with a grappling hook that I made. I could do something with this. I should finish BEP. But then I get an email from Mr. Wizard, the guy who runs the Evo Fighting Championships. And he's like, hey, you know that fighting game player Floe has been playing I Want to Be the Guy, right? It's like, yeah, his videos have been amazing. Because Flo's just a guy who, even after seeing all the videos I've seen of people playing I Want to Be the Guy, nobody suffers as good as Floe. He's like, could you make special I Want to Be the Guy content for Evo? So I'm like, yeah, I could do that. I even have an engine already sitting around that I was thinking of doing something with. This is why I Want to Be the Guy Gaiden is so short. I had like a month or something. And in a month, I whipped together I Want to Be the Guy Gaiden, where it's like I'm making this short thing for this fighting game player to play on stage at Evo. And right before I send it out, I'm like, hey, it would be really cool if I could mess with him while he was playing. So like, in like an hour, I throw together this simple script that reads like a file off of my web server every 25 seconds that I have to edit by hand over FTP to do anything in the game. And I get this out and I send it out. I'm like, okay, Mr. Wizard, just make sure his computer has a Wi-Fi connection. You're gonna have to look this up and watch this because I'm still really proud of this. He plays it and I start connecting and I start messing with him. And it becomes this performance between the two of us, basically. We're both playing off each other. He's like burning me while I'm putting like hints on the top of the screen and trolling him and stuff like this. I'm just doing like funny things where I'll say like I'm gonna help you, and I do something that's actually a dick move. And this goes on for like an hour or something. There's commentators and stuff. It's just this incredible moment. It's one of my favorite things to come out of I Want to Be the Guy. Is this like hour and a half, again, with commentators, which is incredible. They're sitting at because, you know, they're setting up for Evo, so they have all this equipment there. So they're actually, like, sitting in a booth with, like, suits on. It's amazing.
I will have to put that in the description. People need to know. People need to see. Okay, so now we're going to talk about your new game, Brave Earth Prologue. And the first thing I need to ask is there going to be more games? Is it called Prologue because it's going to be a long-running series?
So what I wanted to make with this character and everything, this is actually the first thing I made in Multimedia Fusion 2 when I got it. I made this sprite of this purple-haired night girl that ran around this simple castle, and I wanted to make a Metroidvania. I don't know if I'm ready for this, so I made I Won't Be the Guy. And then after I Won't Be the Guy, I'm like, I think I'm ready to make that game. Oh, but Construct's not where I need it to be yet, and this game might take forever. So I want to be able to make this on a better piece of software that doesn't exist yet. So let me make something now to kind of stall for time. And the thing I made to stall for time became its own fucking multi-year game that took forever to fucking make. So this is the story of being a game designer. So yeah, like I want to make a Metroidvania with this character. I still like I think about the game that I want to make after this all the time. And I'm still debating like certain aspects of it and if I want to do them a certain way. Originally I wanted to make it where it's basically like a Metroidvania with like fighting game mechanics. After seeing so many of those, I'm like torn in two different directions because none of them do them like how I would want to do them. But then they also like showed me certain things about like how slow that can feel. Where it's like I don't know if I want to go that direction anymore or whatever like that, but I know I want to make it like a Metroidvania because I love interconnected worlds.
I love them too. And I noticed that you're also a Souls fan, which also has many interconnected worlds.
That should surprise absolutely nobody. Two of my favorite games ever are Super Metroid and the original Dark Souls.
The first one is probably up there for me as well.
That one by far, well, I haven't played 3 yet. After Brave Earth, I'm going to get a PS4 and I'm going to do whatever. I mean, I guess I could technically get it on PC, but...
Oh, you better get Bloodborne, man.
Yeah, well, yeah, and I'm also going to need to get a PS4 for Bloodborne anyway. You know, but I'm like, yeah, no, I'll wait. I'm not in that much of a rush. I prefer to play those on console anyway, because the online is less janked up by people being dicks. Because these Japanese developers don't know anything about cheat protection in the least.
Yeah, it's probably best to avoid all that.
But yeah, like even like 2 was alright. Like I'm one of those people who wasn't a big fan of 2, but it was still like a good game.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat.
1 hit everything I wanted out of an interconnected world. There was just moments where I would like get to a shortcut and I'd end up someplace and I'd be like, how is this even possible? They have to be cheating. Elevator has to just teleport me someplace. It's like, no, it doesn't. It's just perfectly designed. So I went through the effort of making that Dark Souls map explorer. Have you even seen that?
I think I know what you're talking about.
Or it's like something where it's like you get to have like a flyby FPS view of looking at it's the collision data of the map.
Yeah, okay, yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah, because some people are able to rip that out and stuff and do cool stuff with it.
Yeah, I haven't messed with it myself, but I have seen videos of people messing with it. It's really impressive just how pretty consistent everything is. There are a few things here and there.
The things where they're cheating are not things that I even expected. All the things where I thought they had to be cheating were all real, and like all the things they're cheating on were like little tiny details, like the depth being too big or whatever, where it's like, whatever. This is a magical space anyway, who cares? I think there's like one spot, and I can't even remember where it is, where it's like, oh, okay, these areas overlap.
I think the biggest moment for me where the interconnectivity just like blew me away was because you were mentioning an elevator. You might have been talking about the same thing where you get that elevator that takes you back to the Firelink Shrine. And it's just this moment of just like, holy shit, I can't believe the game looped me back here.
You're right. It's like, that's so convenient and like so awesome.
Did you play Demon Souls?
Yes, I love Demon Souls too, but it doesn't give me the same... In terms of general world-building stuff, it does, but, like, it didn't give me that Super Metroid, like, this world isn't the way the world is designed, like, layout-wise.
Yeah, it wasn't like a Super Metroid where everything was interconnected. It had its own, like, separate levels.
They still did a good job making them interesting and connecting them, but, like, the stage design in that was still amazing.
Going back to Brave Earth Prologue, so you're saying the impetus for that was... It was originally starting off as a simple project, and now it's blown up into something bigger. And you were talking about how you wanted to play more like the original Castlevania. Are there any other inspirations that you had for this game?
This is a really deep cut. A few people who follow me on Twitter will probably recall a few times I've late night got on weird rants about this game on Twitter. There was a Dojin game for the PC years and years ago that was never finished called Vampire. I don't even know what captivated me about it. Like the way the music was and everything like that. It just felt like so like lonely and high fantasy, lonesome bleak snowfields and stuff like that. And I look back at it now and like there's parts of it like where the game just looks like stupid and bad.
I've never heard of this.
It's a really obscure game. There's also the idea that like even though there's a lot of stolen assets in that game, because this is like really early like indie, super early, like before Cave Story. Only a few people made this game, like I could tell. And that's awesome. And that makes me want to try and do the same thing.
So it's kind of similar with I Want to Be the Guy then, where there was a game that you're like, oh, I want to do this type of thing myself.
Not quite, because with Iwata, that was really me being like, this game's unfinished. I want to try and do a better version of this idea. It's also funny, so Iwata eventually got finished after I Want to Be the Guy, and the last area of Iwata is the start of I Want to Be the Guy.
That's amazing!
So we have this closed Ouroboros loop of us being inspired by each other. It's awesome. I am so happy, because I always hated when I would say, oh yeah, I want to do better than Iwata. Because Iwata was great, but it just wasn't finished, and I felt bad about it. And then like Iwata finishes itself and becomes awesome. This makes me happy.
That's a great thing to throw in there. I had no idea that the game did that. That's awesome. When I was looking at some footage of the game for Brave Earth Prologue, I was really taken aback by the visual style. I mean, it looked really striking. It looked amazing. It feels very NES, Super NES.
There's certain things in the game where people look at, like, background elements where it's like, oh, okay, this is like a very straight take of Castlevania 3, which is true for some things in the game. But there's like other things where it's like there's a strong Sunsoft influence. Sunsoft did Batman and really rich uses of black. And I really like that. And I also like that in a lot of games, like the colors. Like in the NES has a really weird color palette. Almost every other color palette you look at, the colors are kind of equidistant from each other in some way. All the colors kind of look unified. If you look at like a Atari palette, you look at an MSX palette and stuff like that, you look at the set of colors, it's like, oh, okay, there's some rhyme or reason to these colors. If you look at the NES palette, there's no rhyme or reason at all. It's just a bunch of random ass colors.
I think I remember looking at it and there was more blue than anything else for some reason.
Right, and you see that in a lot of games too. The NES palette works really nicely with strong blacks, and it also works really nicely if you start using weird colors for things. So like if you look at like Brave Earth, there's blue trees, and it works in that weird 8-bit logic. It's like the stylized darkness. Okay, the trees aren't actually blue, but they're just so dark that they look blue. I was willing to add colors to the NES palette for convenience sake, but I wanted to have to make color choices that were imperfect, because that's what gives a lot of NES games their distinct look. And I think that's what makes them sometimes look better than a lot of PC system games or stuff like that of the same era. Because if you looked at a lot of those games or games made of other systems, it's like they had colors to make things the colors they should be, but they didn't have a lot of great colors for shading and highlight, so everything just kind of looked kind of dull and flat.
Even though Commander Keen is a really good game, I would have to say like that kind of looked flat as well.
Yeah, so in everything in Commander Keen, when you look at it, except for maybe the first Commander Keen, where things are a little bit more strange looking, when you look at the later Commander Keens, it's like everything's kind of the color you'd expect it to be and stuff like that. When you start making things weirder colors, you start thinking about composition more as colors. And if you look at like some of the most beautiful NES games, they're color compositions more than they are literal descriptions of colors for objects. Okay, the ground's just going to be gold. We're in a sewer. And even though you would want the sewer to maybe have some green in the tile, whatever, like, but we're gonna go for these strong like gold with like blue water instead of green water, and it's gonna have like this great color contrast.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. It sounds to me like they really had to work around the limitations of the hardware, and in doing so, actually bred a lot more creativity.
You had to be really clever with colors, and I'm a graphic artist by trade, so for me, like, this sort of composition that you do for like an NES game, I can draw and stuff, and if I take enough time I can draw pretty well, but I'm not a strong illustrator at all, so my strengths are composition. When I'm working just with like these colors and these shapes, it makes composition way easier and way cooler. That fit my strengths way better. And I also found that animation, I feel like I animate pretty well when it's low pixel count. So there's like an unreasonable amount of animation in BEP, more so than you'd have in an NES game. Not sure if I'm gonna go away from this sort of style when I make my next game. The things that it enables me to do are great. I still have some thoughts there because I want to make like a snowy, bleak game. And if you try and look at games that are like winter games on the NES, they look hilarious. Like, they look like everything looks cartoony and whatever. So I don't know what I'm going to do for that. I might do kind of like a hybrid style of things. Because even though I'm trying to make kind of a semi-authentic game right now, I'm not one of those people, like, people get really mad when games are like lo-fi. It's like, oh, this doesn't look like an old console. It's like, whatever. It looks like what it is.
Do they expect you to put a standard definition TV filter on it or something?
Oh my god. Well, there's games now that are doing that too. Like, they're having like really complicated shaders. Like, my thought on that has always been like, hey, if you want to play a game like this and have it look like a CRT, play it on a CRT.
I know that I Want to Be the Guy, you pretty much made that by yourself, right?
Yes.
Are you also making this game pretty much by yourself, or do you have some extra help with this one?
So sound is not an area where I have any expertise at all. So I have 2 people who have done music for me, and I have a sound effects guy, and they're all great. The sound effects guy, Ionistron, he made a gunshot noise with the actual Nintendo chip that sounds like a gunshot. He's so good at sound effects. And I have like 2 musical guys. I have one guy who, I forgot what name he goes by. I don't think he really posts anything anywhere, though. So I think BEP will be the first time anybody will get any exposure to him. But then my other guy, Necrophagion, he's a guy I headhunted off of YouTube. Makes these awesome VRC6 songs. The sound chip I wanted for Brave Earth, the one that was used in the Japanese version of Castlevania 3, he makes all the music in that, and it's awesome. And then I have one friend who helps me with cutscene stuff occasionally. So for the cutscenes, a good portion of it's still me, and a lot of it is also me like working off of her like works or her red lines and sketches and stuff like that. Because she's just an infinitely faster illustrator than me. Like, I can illustrate, but what will take me hours and hours and hours will take her like 5 minutes. So sometimes I'll just tell her, look, all I want from you right now is just give me a red line. And she'll give me a red line. And the stuff I fill in from that red line, 1,000,000 times better than what it would have been if I just did it myself and in like a fraction of the time. So she helps a lot, but it's like I'm the only person working on it day to day. And I just have a few people who have occasionally contributed little bits to the game. Like, the actual gameplay part, like, that's all me. And it's funny because I used to tell myself, like, oh, you can't do graphics at all. And I look at parts of the game, I'm like, this looks nice. Like, I'm proud of this.
You should be proud. I think it looks awesome. I'm very much looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a great game based on what I've seen.
It's like weird because like I look at a lot of indie games that are doing the same thing I'm doing. I feel worried because I think in a lot of ways like their individual assets look better. But then I'll see people and they'll look at BEP and like, this game looks so cool. And I'm like, really? Even with all these other games? Makes me happy.
Looking at the game, I think it has a very strong artistic direction. I think that's a big reason why some people are like, oh, this looks really cool. Even if, theoretically, whatever, some other game might technically look better. The fact that yours has such a strong and distinct look and feel to it makes it stand out more.
Yeah, like, I feel like a lot of stuff feels very, like, even though it's, like, a lot of it's, like, super nice. Like, there's this weird effect I feel with, like, a lot of pixel art games now. Like, I look at stuff where it's, like, not even, like, you know, just like a pixel art game, not even, like, an NES-style game, where you'll have these beautiful sprites and everything's moving, and it's, like, it looks like the game should be amazing. And people don't get excited by it, because I think even people who aren't game designers kind of look at stuff like that and realize, if something looks like that, there's this weird thing where it's, like, either the level design is going to be boring because it's too constrained by the art assets or whatever. It's like people have like a sense where it's like a game almost looks too good to be true. You know, not that it's a lie, just this like, oh, that looks really nice. It's probably gonna not be good. Oh, and also another thing that's like interesting with Brave Earth, this is a thing I've gotten from multiple testers. So it's a stage-based game, but people say like the sense of progression in the game is super strong. You feel like you're traversing a very real area. I had someone say like it's kind of like a Metroidvania with no backtracking and no branching paths, which sounds ridiculous, and it is. I took all the stages and I put them together and I looked at it. Everything fits together. The world is logically laid out while still having strong level design. I'm certainly proud of it. I don't think I've sacrificed too much to make stages play like stages and stuff like that. You know, I'm not too concerned with like, oh, but this has to be like a mountain. I can't have these things, you know, like, which would be when you go too far, when you like get so constrained by wanting to have a place feel like a real place that like you can't do anything interesting with it.
I actually voted for that game on Steam Greenlight.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. I was really enamored by how it looked and played, so I'm rooting for you, man.
People were very supportive. I was expecting to get through it, but I was expecting to get shit on a little bit more by people. Because, like, there's always that feeling where it's like, oh, another pixel indie game, right?
I think it looks more than that, because there have been some games, some NES, SNES, whatever, throwback, retro-style indie games. Some of them just kind of look flat, and they kind of just blend in with all the other ones, but yours manages to really stand out.
There's me and there's the Oniken guys. Joy Mashers is apparently the company. They made another game recently that was really nice looking. Odalis it was like a really nice looking game. I feel a bit of a kindred spirit with them where it's like they seem to draw from the same stuff. They make the same trade-offs of authenticity and stuff like that. Their games feel like, when I look at like certain other games where it's like, you're just doing the style, but you don't get this style. Like they're the other company where I'm like, okay, you guys get this. Like, I think you guys are cool.
I think there's a difference between someone playing a game and saying, I want to make something like this, and saying, I want to copy this. I think there's a big difference between the two.
There's like a passion to like one. You're like passionate about like the kind of limitations and the style of the time and stuff like that. I was talking to Twitter the other day. It's like I almost feel bad like when people are like, oh yeah, it's a guy who makes like nostalgic indie games. It's like I kind of hate that because I don't look at it like that. For me, it's like almost like a pastiche or whatever like that. It's like when people make black and white movies in like now they're like, oh, someone's making a nostalgic movie. Like nobody says that.
It's usually an artistic statement.
Right, it's like saying like, this is interesting and we stopped doing it. What cool things would happen if we did this now?
This isn't the best example because it was more due to budget, but the original Clerks.
Oh yeah, I love Clerks and I love that story.
I think it being black and white adds to the grit of the movie and adds to its charm and atmosphere.
And it's funny though, because that also lines up with the making pixel art indie games. Because it'll be like people are like, oh, you're just doing this because you're too lazy to like make like nice looking sprites. Well, except for the fact you used the word lazy. Yeah, time and money. Kevin Smith did not have the money for a good color film camera. So the movie's in black and white. And if you're going to do a movie in black and white, you might as well play to the strength of black and white with your compositions and stuff.
It's about knowing what you have, knowing what you can do, and what you can do with it.
Yes, there's a lot of stuff in game design that sadly is very cargo culty, where people do things just because it's like, well, this is kind of what people do now, right? And it kind of doesn't end up feeling right. So I feel that a lot even, and I don't even want to say indie games, because I go back and I play lots and lots of old games. Not just like, oh, old great games, I'm going to go back and play Mega Man. The other day, I was just going through a list of TurboGrafx ROMs and just playing random TurboGrafx games. Almost all of them were utter garbage. Not all of them, but most of them were utter garbage.
And most of them were shmups.
Yeah, yes, and the shmups were the better ones, really.
I remember there was one ninja game on it. I think it was called Ninja Spirit. I remember that game being kind of cool.
Oh yeah, I played a little bit of that the other day. Yeah, this is just yesterday. I played a little bit of Ninja Spirit. I was playing like Legend of Axe or something like that. Right? You think about Castlevania 1, and you have this stage where you walk into the stage, and you have this area where there's no enemies. You just have this intro to the castle, and you get in the castle. You have these just like big curtains and everything like that, and like even though it looks ugly because it's like an early NES game, it's still like is kind of like striking. They have this like weird flooded basement area. This early NES game in its first level had a part with no enemies, and then a very distinct different part from the rest of the stage to like give a sense of progression. I try and think about like how many of these games that I randomly play have any sort of level progression in the beginning that sets any sort of mood or set any sort of... It's almost nothing. That sort of level of stage design was very uncommon. It's like that's the reason we only remember certain games. And it's very rare when I play a game that has that people don't know about. And when I do, it's usually because it was a Japanese-only game. And people do kind of know about it. It's just that it's obscure.
Well, there are a few games that kind of like are forgotten by time. The majority of the ones that we remember, it's for a reason. They still hold up.
Yeah, that's what I think. Like, I hate the mentality. But I mean, not that I hate it, because certain people want to do this. And this is really how they feel. I want to go play these things from my childhood and relive my childhood and, have those happy memories of childhood. I'm okay with people doing that. Whatever makes you happy, whatever. But I hate that that's the primary way we refer to people going back and playing old games.
Why can't it just be because they're going back to play the games because they think the games are fun and good?
We don't do this for movies. We don't do this for books. We don't do this for music. We only do this for video games.
Theoretically, it should be the same, because when you're going back to something that's older, you have to have different standards to a certain extent, and yet only video games are the ones like, oh, they're doing it just because it's through nostalgia. It sounds like a double standard to me.
Yeah, and it's sad because it's a self-inflicted double standard. Gamers themselves reinforce this idea that going back is this thing you do because of nostalgia. And nostalgia can play into it. Like, I think about Star Wars a lot. People who deeply love the original Star Wars. Part of it's nostalgia. I am nostalgic for Star Wars, but Star Wars is also great. And the great part's more important than the nostalgic part.
Nostalgia at the end of the day is more tied to how you felt during that time, and less about the thing itself.
Yes! Since a few people talk about those, like, oh yeah, reliving my happy memories. Everybody thinks, like, that's the purpose. It's like, no. Do that if you want. Because I know plenty of people who go back and play old games and they're like, I'm being nostalgic. It's like, you didn't even play that game when you were a kid. My favorite games now on the NES were not my favorite games from when I was a kid. Except for Bionic Commando, which is the best game ever.
That game is pretty awesome.
I love Bionic Commando so much. That's still a game that I will just randomly play and just like shoot through in like 20 minutes. Especially when you get really good at the grappling of that game. You watch like a speed run of the original Bionic Commando, it's awesome. Like that's sadly the reason I don't like Rearmed. Like Rearmed's so cool. Like Rearmed's like the way I would suggest most people to play Bionic Commando who don't know any better, but it's just a game to like pick up randomly and just like breeze through in 20 minutes. The original NES Bionic Commando is just the best. But yeah, like I hated Castlevania as a kid. It's like, oh, this is just bullshit. Like, why would I want to play this game? That and Castlevania 3 are like my favorite Nintendo games. Ninja Gaiden, which I also hated. I love Ninja Gaiden. Like most of the Super Nintendo games, except for like Super Metroid, are like I love ActRaiser 2. It's like I never even played ActRaiser. I didn't even know ActRaiser 2 existed.
I mostly only played the first one. I haven't really played the second one. I should get around to it.
ActRaiser 2 is way, way, way different. Like, ActRaiser 1 is this, oh yeah, you have this world building, and you have this action game that's pretty good. It's a pretty good action game. ActRaiser 2, people sleep on it because they expected ActRaiser. Like, that game sucks. But it's like, when you get good at that game, you have a downstab that has full body invulnerability, and you need it to get through the game. You just have abilities in this game that are ridiculously awesome. It's a game that I find intellectually fulfilling from a game design standpoint and fun to play. There's some nostalgia there. I didn't even know about the game. It was just a great game that people slept on that I'm like glad to have found.
I have a lot of fondness for the PS1 especially, and I went back and played a game, an RPG called Grandia, which bears a lot of similarities to Chrono Trigger actually because of the combat system and the way it works. And I never grew up with that game, so I wasn't being nostalgic when I played that game in my fucking 20s. I played it and I enjoyed it because it was a good game.
Yeah, it's like, I played all the King's Fields and Shadow Tower.
I read your blog on that.
Oh my god, Shadow Tower is so cool.
I think that's on PSN.
Oh, is it? Because that would be worth it. Though, I'm really sad that Shadow Tower Abyss is really the game that doesn't exist anywhere else. But, well, now you can emulate the PlayStation 2 now, so it's okay. It's like, that game was gonna get localized. And then Sony of America shot it down because they're like, no, this just makes the console look cheap. Sony of America during the PlayStation 2 era was like the biggest tyrants.
Vic Ireland, who used to own Working Designs before it went under, he poured so much money into trying to get one of the Mystical Ninja Goemon games on PS2 and bring it over here, and Sony of America just refused.
I had that problem as a Guilty Gear fan, where for years they wouldn't let them release updated Guilty Gears because, like, no, it just looks the console look cheap. And it wasn't until like Accent Core that they were able to release in America after the PlayStation 3 was even out. So it's kind of like, who cares now? Whatever. Okay, yeah, and Shadow Tower is on PSN. I would recommend that because the actual copy of the game is like super expensive.
I know it's made by Front Software, so as a Souls fan, I will definitely check it out.
Shadow Towers is the Demon Souls of Kingsfield. That's how I would put it. It's just this game, it's oppressively dark. It feels like there's a more weird creativity to it that's kind of like hit and miss. It is the most interesting of those games. Think about like the Kingsfield games. Kingsfield 4 is probably the best game of them all.
That's the one on PS2?
Yeah, that's probably the best one of it, but it's like the least interesting. It's kind of a weird dichotomy. It has the least wrong with it. Combat feels the best in it. It's still good. It's a good game, but it's like... But like then I'll go back and I'll play like Kingsfield 2, and it's like, this game is so weird and so raw. it's just so fascinating. I mean, there's like a lot of games I play where it's like, I love this game because it's interesting as a game designer, but it's hard for me to recommend. I mean, I can recommend Kingsfield 2 and Shadow Tower, but it's like, there are recommendations where it's like, if you get sick of this game really fast, maybe push on a little bit more, but don't be afraid to just be like, fuck this. Like you're either gonna like the game or you're not. Like, if you don't like the game, it's just gonna be a horrible, horrible slug.
I can't remember which Kingfield it was. I actually owned one of them on PS1 as a kid. I think when you start the game, you immediately start in the field. And I remember the game feeling, especially as a kid, I was pretty young at the time, the game felt so oppressive to me.
Okay, so you were in the field. So that was Kingsfield 3. That was Kingsfield 2 in America. They never released Kingsfield 1 over here. So it's like one of those annoying things where it's like, at least it's like Final Fantasy, where it's like, oh yeah, I love Final Fantasy 3. 90% of the time people are talking about Final Fantasy 6. But with Kingsfield, like, this is just one number off.
Yeah, so it's that much more confusing.
Kingsfield 3 is really cool, too. And just, like, all the NPCs. It's weird, because you look at them, and they're like, oh, they're so raw and creepy because they don't have that many animations and stuff like that. But then you play, like, Demon Souls and Dark Souls, they just keep doing the same thing, where they're like, hey, the limitation where, like, the NPCs looked really weird and creepy because we couldn't do much with them. Why don't we just keep doing that even though we can make them look better? And it works, and it's great. Like, just when you talk to people, their heads slowly turning at you.
Some people complain about it, but I don't care. I love that the characters in Souls games don't move their mouths. It's almost like they're communicating with you telepathically.
It's like everyone's dead and that's the only way to talk. Yeah.
I know some people complain about it. It's like, oh, it's cheap or whatever. I'm like, I don't care. I think it adds to like the creepiness in a subtle way. So the last thing I wanted to ask you about Brave Earth Prologue is, do you have a release date in mind?
I was shooting for January. I don't think I'm going to make that, but sometime next year, hopefully pretty early. I might get delayed a little bit because also I might be working with a publisher. I can't go into too much detail of that yet, but there's some upsides to that too. I might end up being able to port the game, which was something that I didn't think was going to be possible.
If it makes it on PS4, I'll definitely buy it.
I mean, it'll probably be like any console release is going to be way off. At least I can say like there is a non-zero chance of that happening now. When before I would say like no count on it. Yeah, no, because there's connections with people with like porting houses that are used to like almost rewriting games from scratch, which is what you'd almost have to do for Brave Earth because of how it's programmed. But I figure what might happen if that happens is you'll get like, you know, Brave Earth Prologue Plus or something on something with like added content, because porting it will probably take another year or whatever if that happens. Like, I'm not even going to say that's going to happen, but it's nice to be in a situation now where I can at least say that there's a possibility this will come out on something else. Because before it was like, people be like, oh, will this be on handhelds? Will this be whatever? It's like, not a chance in hell. Yeah, that was a straw, like, talking to the unnamed publisher, because nothing's been signed yet, where it's, like, talking about deals and stuff like that. Well, it'd be nice to, like, not have to deal with marketing, but, like, I don't know if I want to give up any... Not that I'd be giving up anything much than a revenue split, but, you know, I was going wishy-washy on it, and they're like, we would be really motivated to, like, put your game to a porting house. I'm like, okay, now that's a big deal for me. But, yeah, it's there. Like, all the stages are done, for example. I'm mostly doing cutscene and cleanup, writing like additional dialogue for like fluff stuff and stuff like that. Basically, we're in like I'm in the finishing and polish part of the game, and that could still take a while, but it might not. I don't know how long I'm going to end up taking on it. I think I'm moving my mind more over to March now. That might still be optimistic, but I'm now at the point where I'm going to start giving myself release dates in my head at least to try and motivate me.
I wanted to ask you some questions about that Metroidvania game that you wanted to make. So you were saying that you wanted to put fighting game elements in it, so would it be fair to say then that would kind of make it a character action game?
Yeah, but I don't know if I want to do that now, because when I think about character action games, they can be so slow to get anywhere, and it changes the way you approach combat. It's harder to have the situation where you have like these like enemy placement matters less because enemies move so much, and it's more about managing the group and the area and stuff. And in a lot of these games with like 2D combat action, like I'm thinking like Valda's Story, which is still a cool game, but it's like the combat in that felt just like whatever. I knock people up in the air and I hit them down with the air combo. So it's like I'm still trying to think like if I even want to do that. I know I want to do a game that has multiple attack buttons. I like the idea of having to like use fighting game style attacks to like deal with threats in different positions and stuff like that. I was also thinking it might be fun if I did things where its combos were super short, Like we're talking about like 2-hit combos, maybe like 3. Maybe you don't have a launcher, but you could have a situation where it's like, let's say you poke an enemy out the air, you have like one move that can kind of boost them a little bit, then you have like a move you jump and you knock them down. Like that would be like your optimal 3-hit combo if something jumped at you. But most of the time you're just whacking things. And like, so you don't have to worry about like a complicated combo system because it's kind of limited when you would use it. It's like, I don't know. I'm still tossing around because since the game's taken so long for me to get to making, I have so much more reference for how these type of games tend to work out and play. I don't know if I want to try and do the challenging thing of, let me try and do what I originally want to do and somehow make it work. You know, be like, okay, everyone was just doing it wrong. This is how you do this, right? I don't know if I have the chops to do that. I don't know if I have the ideas that would make that work. So I don't know if I want to like try and force it to work or if I want to just go a slightly different direction.
Do you have any ideas of the game beyond it being a Metroidvania game with this type of combat system? Like, have you thought about how it would look and feel or the story?
Yes, especially the story. Like, I have the theme better than BEP. I hate to say, but like the BEP story's a little bit of a mess. Hopefully me thinking it's kind of a mess means for most people it'll just be like, oh, okay, this is fine. There's some good stuff in here. All right. Because that was kind of done, because again, this was supposed to be a short game, so I kind of had to like adapt to what I was making. I wasn't planning it out as much as I should have because I didn't think it was going to be much. I think it's an okay place now, but I still have like these lingering things because I know the amount of like shit I had to do to make a story work in it. Once I realized that this was going to be like a longer game and stuff. Brave Earth, the one that the Metroidvania I want to do, it's like I've been thinking about the story for that forever. So it's like I have a very good idea what I want to do with that.
I've always heard that for developers, having a good story in their game is always like this uphill battle. Would you say you've been experiencing that with Brave Earth?
Yes. And I think even when I work on the other one's Tower in the Sky, I think even when I get around to Tower in the Sky, I'll probably have the same frustrations. Having it in your head and implementing it are two different things. But I do know that now I have this extra struggle of trying to make things work in a framework that was kind of not laid out super well. It's hard to describe this situation without like going into spoilers, but it's like kind of having to just like make up parts of a story as I went and then realizing like, no, I have to work this all out or this is going to be disaster, and having to clean up the beginning and stuff like that. It was like a bit of a pain. Basically, the problem was I limited my scope before I wrote the story, and then I had to write something to fit what I had made, which is actually how a lot of games work now, like a lot of AAA games, and why a lot of AAA games sometimes seem like, what's up with the story? Because most of the time, you're already making things, like you're making your sequel to your franchise game before you even have the story. It's like, okay, what set pieces can we make? Okay, but we got to work out the story. Okay, but we need to work in these set pieces because we already made them, because development's so long that we can't wait.
I also imagine that some stories for games just don't end up doing very well because a lot of modern games tend to be pretty short, and I think that's why a lot of RPGs tend to get praised more for their stories because they have more time to flesh things out.
Yes. I mean, it's getting better now because, like, I think as people are getting better, you can tell stories during the action stuff. But you gotta plan for that more. It's still antithetical to how people are used to making games, even with what I'm doing, where there's still a very strong story gameplay dichotomy. I don't think that's as big a deal as a lot of designers. There's only so much you can do in a AAA game if that's your format. It's like when you think of those games where they manage to tell a good story, it's usually because it's like characters never fucking shut up and stuff like that.
And that's pretty much it. I want to thank Kayin for joining me. It was such a pleasure. There's going to be links in the description for the Steam page for Brave Earth Prologue. There's also going to be a download to I Want to Be the Guy, since it is free, if you want to give it a chance. And there's also going to be a link to Kayin's website if you are so inclined. He has his own podcast, and he has a really interesting blog. And again, one more time, thank you very much for joining me, Kayin. It was such a pleasure.
Not a problem again, anytime.
And I will see you all next time.